Okay, so this is part 3, and in this part we're going to go over all the operating of the gear, how to do some basic system tuning, basic mixer operation and orientation. And first off, I'm going to show you some tools that you should always carry with you. So first item, I always have a multi-tool with me. You never know what you're going to need to fix or need pliers for, or a knife or wire strippers, so you can get everything in that. Screwdriver and a multi-tool. I always carry one of these on me everywhere I go. Second tool I always carry is a decent flashlight. You can get LED models and little mag lights. It's always good to have an LED because it's usually brighter than those little mini mags, so I always use LED flashlights. So there's different options of flashlights, obviously, but you're always working in dark places, seeing in the back of your racks, hooking up your gear, so I always carry a flashlight on me. Different types of tape I have. I always carry electrical tape to temporarily fix stuff. Sometimes if the cable gets nicked, you can just tape it and fix it later. Hotting all your cables together, as I showed. I always have electrical tape. Another tape, this is called spike tape. You can find this on like Grainger and stuff. You can find this on the internet. Grainger is a good website for all sorts of spike tape, gaffer's tape, stuff like that. You don't want to use any sort of duct tape on any of your gear because it will leave a residue behind, and this will not. It's pretty expensive. Your full-size gaff tape is about 20 bucks a roll, but for taping all your cables down, you want to use the 2-inch. This stuff, this little spike tape, is about 1/2 inches, and this is what we label a lot of our cables with. Our connectors, you see, the back of my rack is all labeled with stuff. You can mark locations of gear and everything, so this comes in handy. And then this is what is called board tape. So this is not masking tape. It's a thinner tape. It doesn't leave residue behind like masking tape does, and it's a smoother writing surface. And this is actually what gets used on all of your consoles for labeling. So this is actually called board tape. Once again, search the internet and try to find those different supplies. Next, I have a good set of headphones. There's lots of headphones out there, especially in the $100 price range for like pro closed back ear headphones. I like the Sennheiser HD280 Pros. They're $100. There's lots of other models for $100. The reason I like these, they're nice, they're flat sounding, and they're pretty isolated. They attenuate 32 dB of external noise. So when you're doing your mixes and you want to listen to a specific instrument, the solo in on that, what's the kick drum sounding like, what's the guitar sounding like, you can isolate, use your headphones and solo in on that instrument, so you can hear individual sources. So you definitely, when mixing live music, want to use a pair of good headphones to isolate your source. And then the last gadget, if you can afford one, I suggest getting a tablet, because there's a lot of cool tools on here that you can use. If you also have an iPhone, you can get the same app, and this is called the Audio Tools app. It is a $20 app, but well worth it. So if you get the app, you get the tutorial, you can see a lot of the stuff. So you have a lot of stuff in here, like SPL meters. You have some acoustic analysis tools. There's different stuff you have. There's different options, so you get SPL, and you got different SPL meters and graphs. You can buy some of these upgrades. Acoustics, we have an RTA, which is real-time analyzer. There's all these other cool tools you can buy the extras for. There's different signal generators for pink noise and sine waves and stuff. There's calculators in here, so if you're needing to figure out dB conversions and sine waves, delay, there's lots of cool stuff you can find in here. There's another one called AV Tools that's I don't remember how much that one costs, but it's another good app to get, and it has some stuff for lighting on dip switches. When you're looking at some of those resistance and wanting to find amperage and how much you're drawing, just calculators that are built into that. So technology with the apps has made stuff really cool. So the main one I use a lot is the real-time analyzer. So you see here, as I'm talking, you see these little lines bouncing here, and this is how we analyze our frequency content. So when I show you how to do room tuning, when we get to that, this is what I use a lot. It works pretty good. You can buy an actual like real-time analyzer unit. It might cost you several $100s, sometimes upwards of $1,000 with an actual RTA microphone. But like I said, use the gear for the job you're doing. If you're using an iPad, it works pretty good for like your bar type situations where you're not going to get a perfectly balanced room anyways. It's not a concert studio that's been acoustically treated and stuff like that. So your little smartphone apps in here will work good enough for tuning feedback and stuff like that. So you see down here on an analyzer works, if you have no idea what one is a real-time analyzer. So right now as I'm talking, you see the frequencies are down here at the bottom, and they give you reference points, and then in this app, if you click at any point and move it over, it'll show you the exact frequency that I'm at. So right now I'm focused on 400 Hertz, and as I'm talking, you see the frequencies that are moving. So I'll show you how to do that with your 31 band. You see feedback, and you see that frequency of how to cut out that frequency. So very, very helpful tool to get to really tune in a PA system to cut out all your feedback frequencies. Like I said, they have this for the iPad and the iPhone. There are simpler versions for Android, but this Audio Tools app is only available for the for Apple products. So if you have a Droid, there is one. You can look up Real-Time Analyzer. It's actually cheaper. I believe it's only a few bucks just to get an analyzer. But if you have an Apple product like an iPad or an iPhone, I definitely recommend getting this $20 app because it is well worth it. You will use it a lot for figuring things out. So next in the process, we're going to start by the proper power up sequence. So this is one thing you really want to get right. I'm going to show you the proper power up sequence for all of your gear. So to keep from popping speakers and blowing speakers and stuff like that, you always want to start with all of your what's called preamp gear, or your front of house gear. So you have your mixers and your rack gear and stuff like that. You always want to power all that on first before you power your amps on, because if you have your amps already on and signal going to your speakers and you turn this gear on, it could pop, and then you could actually damage speakers and blow speakers and stuff like that. So I start by my preamp gear. You turn that on. And the reason I like having this voltage indicator on here, so right now I'm getting good power. I'm getting 123 volts actually out of my garage. If you turn this on and you're only reading like 80 amps or 80 volts, excuse me, something like that, that could be a sign that there's a problem with the power and you don't want to turn anything else on. You don't want to run your gear on like half voltage like that. You can cause damage to your equipment. So having this voltmeter is really good to monitor how many volts you're actually getting. So this is not measuring current. This is not your amp load. This is actually your incoming voltage of what you're receiving. So if this is reading like 200, you'd be way wrong, and you want to shut your stuff off because you can cause damage. So you want to be reading between 100 and 120. Normally about 110 is what it's called. It's also called 120 when you look at like your power ratings. Anywhere from 110 to 120 is the range you want to be in when operating your gear. So that's very handy to get this one. So now all my preamp gear is on. My mixer is already on. I leave the power on and it's all plugged into this power conditioner. So now that is on. And then next we go to our amp rack. We power all that preamp gear first, so the crossover gets powered on. And then after your preamp gear is on, then you turn your amps on and your final stage. So there we go. So they did their startup. All my gear is on now. And then first thing we'll do is this crossover setting. Okay, so basic crossover operation here. And so basically what a crossover does is the crossover point at where your different speakers will split. So I talked about the highs taking the highs and the lows taking the lows, being your subs and your tops. This is what actually divides that up. So basically this is the same on both sides, so I'll show you the one side. Basic controls you will see is like input, crossover. This one has a second crossover frequency. You have delay and some gain controls for low, mid, and high output. Basically, for a rule of thumb, you can leave your outputs at 0, or what's called unity, which means you're not subtracting and you're not adding to it on your sends here for low and high output. And depending on how complicated your crossover is, it'll have different settings on it. But in the basic mode that we're in, running a two-way, so which means it's a high and a low. This one crossover point here is dividing which frequency the sub will take and which frequencies the top will take. So a general rule of thumb, most pro systems from what I've seen will usually run their subs at about 80 hertz, but they're also working with more powerful tops that can handle higher up. So what I do is look at the frequency range of what the sub can really handle, and a lot of times it'll have like curves and stuff in its power range and things like that. So I usually run mine actually a little higher up, about 120 hertz, as you can kind of see on here. It's hard to focus in that small, but so you'll see your readings on your crossover point, and you'll see that. So I set mine at about 120, and that's not like a dead set point. So basically what that's doing, it's got a, you know, kind of a wave, if you could imagine, of there's a point, and that's where it starts to cross over. So at 120 hertz, the highs will go a little below that and go up, and the lows will go a little above that, and they're rolling down. So that takes a lot of the bottom end power out of the tops, so the subs can handle all that boomy low end from 120 hertz down all the way down to your kick drum, your bass guitar, the bottom crunchiness, and a low, you know, drop tuning guitar, and even some vocals can go pretty low. Singers like Randy Travis can actually sing down to like 55 hertz. We had him before, and his engineers talked about that. Most vocalists will cut off around 120. So that is opening up all that range for our tops. So if our tops had to go all the way down to, you know, all the way down to your sub frequencies at 20 hertz there, it would muddy them up, and they wouldn't be able to be as loud and as powerful and as clear, because they're having to take that low frequency. So the sub is taking all that low power and it's handling that, and then so now our tops are going from 120 up, so we clear up the top end and you get a more quality sound out of your top end by using a crossover. So that's just a simple two-way system. Like I said, you could go up in systems to where your mids has a separate point and your highs have a separate point, but this is a very budget friendly way to go, just with a two-way system like that, having a separate sub and a separate top. And then also this protects your subs from getting all your high frequencies, because you don't want your subs running you know, like in your upper case, like, you know, 5K and stuff. You don't want that going to your subs at all. So if you tried to run tops and subs without a crossover and you just linked them all together to where everything was getting everything, it's really gonna muddy it up, and you don't want those frequencies going to the speakers that aren't meant to handle it. So there you go. So that's kind of a general setting. Research the heck out of that. You have different crossover points, but 120 is a good starting point if you're just starting out and you want to use a crossover. Like I said, anywhere from 80 to 120 is a good range to start with. So with that, next we'll go over some mixer orientation, and then we'll do some feedback tuning with a microphone and getting a microphone signal into our board. Okay, so this is our mixer orientation, and we are going to go over all the basic controls and what these actually do, in case you don't know. So this is a very simple mixer, so it doesn't have a whole lot of complicated controls. So we'll start at the top, and this is what is called your preamp section. And so basically you have your mic in and your line in. Most mixers will have some variant of this that will usually have both on them, just to give you the options of different types of connectors. And this one actually says balanced or unbalanced on the input. So if you watch the second video where I talked about wiring, I talked about balanced and unbalanced cables. So this mixer on its inputs can take either type of cable, balanced or unbalanced. Next here you have a low cut, and this mixer is a 75 hertz low cut, and it will cut 18 dB per octave. And what this does is it cuts out all the low frequency that you don't need to that channel. So my first one is my kick, so obviously I want that low frequency in there. And then I have like snare and overheads over here. Well, I have that low frequency going into my kick drum mic, and my overheads I want to pick up more of the high toms and the cymbals and stuff, so I don't want to have extra low frequency from like your bass guitar, which might be sitting next to your drum kit, or your kick drum, which is already being picked up by the kick drum mic over here in channel 1. So this will help cut out a lot of that extra low noise. It helps clean up your mix, and it just makes it a little easier for you. It's like a pre-EQ basically, so this will cut out everything automatically from 75 hertz and below on this mixer. Some more expensive mixers will have an adjustable high-pass filter, which is also a low cut, it's the same thing, and it actually is a high-pass filter, so that means the highs will pass through it and the lows will not, and it will actually have an adjustment that you can turn from maybe all the way down to 40 hertz and turn it up as high as 400 hertz, to where you can cut 400 and below. So the price range of mixer you buy is going to be, you know, the features is obviously going to go up with the price range and quality. So, but like I said, this is just a basic mixer we use for simple little shows. So the 75 hertz cut can be pretty powerful actually if you use it correctly. So next in your chain is your gain control. It's also called a trim, is the same term. There's a lot of terms that go back and forth. A lot of that comes from British variants and English variants, and from recording to live. You'll see different names for controls, but trim and gain does the same thing. And what this is doing, this is adding voltage to your incoming signal. So this is a small amount of voltage that comes down your mic signal, because microphones don't put out, you're talking about millivolts that they put out into this, and this gain or trim is turning that voltage up to give you a usable signal. And then you move on down the chain. Now you have your EQ. One thing, proper terminology is that on a mixer, these are not called knobs. They're actually called potentiometers, or pots for short. So you always see, you know, pros will say, oh, you know, the aux1 pot or the aux2 pot. That's what they're called. It's not technically called a knob. That's kind of a layman's term. Potentiometer is the actual electronic circuit that is underneath of this plastic cap, built in under the hood, is what they call it, under the surface of all this. These are all individual potentiometers on all these. If you go to Radio Shack, you can actually see what one is. So that's their correct term, is a potentiometer or a pot. So kind of get used to that terminology, and then people, you know, might look at you funny. Oh, what are you calling it? That is the correct term, is the pot. So this is the EQ section, and this console is pretty general as to what you'll see on a lot of lower end consoles, unless you spend, you know, probably close to $1,000 or more on a mixer. Is you have a high, and this one is a fixed EQ at 12. It's a high shelf, so basically everything above 12K, if I turn this to the right, will be turning everything 12K and up. It will be turning it up. If you turn it to the left or counterclockwise, it is turning that down. And then this gives you what's called a sweepable mid. So on this mid frequency, this console goes from 100 hertz up to 1 kilohertz that you can select in that range, and then there's a gain control for that to attenuate that frequency or boost that frequency. And then you have a low, which is also a shelf on this one, which is again a shelf. Either if it's a low shelf, it is cutting when you turn to the left, or boosting above below that fixed point. So it's at 80 hertz, so everything 80 and below is being boosted or cut. Now if you get into more higher end consoles and mixers, you're getting, you know, into digital boards and stuff, you'll actually get selectable frequencies for every single one of these, and it'll be a 4-band instead of just use 3. So we have a high, mid, and a low. You'll have a high mid, low mid, and a low, and then you'll have what's called a Q adjustment or bandwidth adjustment. And if you have a more expensive console, you'll see that control on there, and that is a more think of it as zeroing in a more fine adjustment on whatever frequency you select. So say if this one did have a Q control and I put that frequency at 1K, you have a Q adjustment that would widen that up to go way below 1K and way above 1K, so you can really take out like a big chunk of mid-range. Or say maybe 1K or 1.25K was your problem area, it will allow you to narrow in just on that, you know, frequency in a very small pattern, so you're really not affecting all the surrounding frequencies. And then talking in frequencies, just a general knowledge real quick. is the textbook range of human hearing. What you'll learn in every audio course is 20 to 20 kilohertz. That's 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Usually you call it K when it gets above 1,000 hertz. They go 1K, 2K, just because it's quicker to say than 1,000 kilohertz. They just call it 1K. And everything below that's usually 900 hertz, and below 800, 7.5, so on all the way down. And 20 hertz is generally what humans cannot hear past. You can feel sometimes below 20 hertz, but you really can't hear it, so it's out of the range of human hearing. And most adults will not be able to hear, usually above 16 to 17, depending on how you've been in your life with loud noises. But a lot of adults actually can't hear above 16K. So there's a lot of frequencies up there that older people cannot hear. So that's why it's always good to wear earplugs when you play, especially drummers and guitar players, because once you ruin those high frequencies, you don't get them back. So quick little thing on the on EQ range there, so you understand what the hertz and the K actually means. So then moving on down to this next section is called the aux bus, or the auxiliary bus. And depending on the range of mixers, again, will determine how many of these buses you have. This one has two separate buses, and then it has a effects bus. So you have aux 1 and 2, and aux 3, which is your effects bus. And so basically what that means is you're busing the sound somewhere else to the mixer, and that'll usually go to an aux master output. So when we get down to the fader, we'll talk about that, and you'll see the difference as to what an aux does and what the actual channel strip does. So when you come here, you have aux 1, and this one is actually labeled monitor. And anything, usually, if it is labeled monitor, means that it's pre-fader. And pre-fader means that this level can be controlled no matter what position this is in. So this fader can be all the way down or way up, and that level will not adjust aux 1. So if aux 1 is here at about 12 o'clock, it will stay the same level no matter what I do with this fader, because it is pre-fader. And this is what you want to do when you're mixing your monitors, because obviously your band members on stage need different levels of different signals than what you need at front of house. When you're trying to make a pleasing mix for the audience, the band might only want to hear so much kick drum and so much vocal. So this is a separate control for them. This board here allows us to select pre or post with the second auxiliary. So if I wanted this aux in post fader, means this will turn it up and down. So if I cut this fader completely out, that aux will go completely out. If I boost it up, that aux will get louder depending on its point of where it's set here. It'll go up with that. So if I put it in pre, this is how I get my second monitor output on this one. So pre fader, it means it's pre of this fader. So this level is now independent. So now I have two separate monitor sends that I can send to the stage. So I could do one for downstage, which is where your vocals is. That is like the front of your stage. Upstage is the back half of your stage, which is where your drummer is. It's called your upstage. And so he can have his own separate mix, and so, or however you want to do it. So it gives you two mixes to work with. If you buy a more expensive board, you might get 3, 4, 5, 6. The console I work on at work has 24 auxiliaries. So you can do a lot of separate routing with that, because it's actually meant to be a monitor board, and you can mix stereo in-ears and 12 different wedges and side fills and all sorts of extra stuff. But for the simple consumer bar show and simple concerts that you might be doing, 1 or 2 fader or 1 or 2 auxes might work, and then 4 is definitely a good solid number. If you can afford to buy a console with 4, you can go a long way with 4 monitor sends. So this third one is labeled effects, and that is sending to the onboard effects. Not all mixers will have an onboard effects, but this one does. It routes internally to its effects section, which is over here, and you'll see your aux ends. It's kind of hard to see with the camera, but so you see 1, 2, and 3 is your effects, and this is the master level. So if I turn these all the way down, and I have something turned up over here on this channel strip, so if I turn off aux 1, that will not go anywhere, because the aux 1 send master over here is turned down. So generally for your sends, you want to keep them, your master sends, at unity or at 0, and that's why every mixer has a little 0 up there, and then they will usually kind of click into space. Once you're turning past it, you're actually boosting. So unity means you're neither adding to or taking away from the voltage. So basically is if this doesn't exist. When you turn it to your left, you're subtracting voltage. You turn it to your right, you're adding voltage. So that is that term of what unity actually means, is it's basically you're allowing it to pass through this and go on to your next stage. So you see on down back to your channel strip, next you have a pan control, and most mixers will have a pan control as long as it has a stereo output, a left and a right. So this is controlling, steering it, kind of say, where it's going to, further to the left, further to the right. So kick drum, you usually want to keep center. Snare, some people like to keep it center, some people like to offset it more as you see it, as you're looking at the stage. You might want to put your snare a little further to the right because you see it that way in your drum kit. A lot of people just leave kick and snare, you know, smack in the middle, make it nice and punchy. But then your overheads, they give you that nice pleasing stereo image. You want to widen these guys maybe all the way, maybe just a quarter of the way. It's really up to you and how you want that mix to sound. So I like to take my overheads and open them all the way to the right and all the way to the left, and it gives you the furthest, most spread apart stereo image for the drum set, and it makes it more pleasing. And then I have bass, I'll leave that center, and then so maybe if I have two guitars going, I'll kind of do a quarter of the way over, so not all the way over, because they might be doing some different rhythms, but you can get, you know, some nice, a nice pleasing stereo image with some different stuff going on, you know, maybe rhythm and a lead guitar, and you get some spread apart guitars, and then your lead vocal, you usually leave front and center. If you have backup vocals, maybe you do want to steer those around and put one on the left side, one on the right side, and whatever. So that's just in the art of mixing, which takes years to master that. You just learn more of as you go along. Once you learn those basic controls and what they do, it's just playing with it and figure out what sounds good to you. So the last few buttons you have on your channel strip, past your mute button, this console has a solo button, and most mixers in this price range and up, spend a few $100s, you will have a solo button, and it's also a PFL level set. So what that means is your pre-fader listen, so you can see that incoming signal over here on your meters as well. It will bust it too, and you'll see your lights jumping up and down once we have signal going to it. And what that is doing is it is allowing you to see your level, and when you solo that, your headphones, so this console, the headphones control is right here, you'll hear that in your headphones before you send it out your mains. So if you want to listen to it and see your incoming signal, you always want to check that first to make sure you're not slamming this and hitting red lights, because you don't want to send that signal to your PA system if it's clipping your mixer here, because then it's you can damage speakers and stuff. So you want to make sure you have a manageable level. And general rule is kind of basic mixing. Like I said, it takes years of mixing to really master in and do what you like. But general rule of thumb, try to keep it around 0 on your meters. Here is a good input level to work with. If you work with too little of an input level, you're just amplifying the noise that's in the board. Especially in analog, all analog boards have some sort of noise to them. And if you're not turning up that gain enough up here, you are only amplifying board noise by the time you get to this fader. So you want to get enough incoming voltage that you're working with the sound coming into that microphone rather than all the external noise from the cables and all the other gear it might be going through. So you want to get a good working level. So try to keep your signals around 0 and momentarily peeking into that yellow range, but you definitely want to stay out of the red, and you don't want to clip, because that's where you cause distortion, and you can actually burn up your preamps and your mixer. If you're constantly slamming that, they will go out. You can actually blow them up. I've seen that happen in the recording studio, which is very expensive. Is if you plug something in, you had the gain too hot, you can actually blow out a gain pre-gain section, and that's really expensive to replace those preamps, especially in a $100,000 recording console. So it's always good when you plug something in. That's a second thing. Make sure your gains are turned all the way down before you plug in your mic cables, just in case you get a pop or something like that. You don't want to damage this preamp as well. So it's a good habit when you get done with the show to turn everything down and start from scratch, bringing your gains back up. So back down here to the fader section, you do have a couple more controls on this mixer. Like I said, yours is probably going to be different depending on what you buy. You have a sub button, which a lot of mixers will have sub outputs, and you see that's these guys over here, so sub 1 and 2, and these you can just use to send other places. A common thing people use for this is also it's called a subgroup, is the name for these. They're just abbreviated by saying sub 1 and 2, but subgroup, and basically allows you to group together. So say I have my kick, my snare, and 2 overheads right here, and if I wanted to turn the whole drum set up and down, instead of having to grab all these individual ones, and maybe I have my kick set, my snares up here, and my overheads a little down, trying to keep that same structure of fader position and bring it all down, you can do this and hit every one of these to that sub. So you press them all into their engaged, and you don't assign them to your main. So down here, this last button is my main mix, and I can not send these to my main, so they're going to that subgroup, and I'll put them, you know, here. So you bring this up, and then you can assign this to your left-right output, and now you have all your drums on one fader, but then it would be in mono. And depending on the way the mixer works, this one actually, depending on where this pan goes, makes it go to 1 or 2. So if I were to do this with this board, I would have to put this one the left side, this one the right side, to keep my drums in stereo. So it just depends on the options of what your board has. Some of them will allow you to have a stereo group, and you can assign them anywhere you want. Others, the pan control will let it assign to group 1 or group 2. So you'll just have to look at your mixer and look at your controls and see what you have. Then of course the last part is you have your fader, which most people pretty much know what this does, and that of course is the level to which that channel is in your main mix. So again here you see this little black line in this kind of boxed in area. This is what is called your unity gain, that term again, which means if you're at 0, this fader is not taking away from the voltage or adding to it. This is actually a variable resistor which is in here, and basically at 0 it's not doing anything to the voltage. As you pull a fader down, and you know, this one will go all the way down to what's called negative infinity, and that's that little kind of figure 8 looking thing you see at the very bottom. It means it's clamping that completely off and no voltage passes through, all the way up to plus 10, which means you're adding to that voltage. So generally lots of people like to try to keep their mixes around unity, because then once again you're allowing that signal to cleanly pass through. Once you're pulling stuff away, you start picking up more of that noise of the individual fader and of the console. So a lot of people like to try to mix around unity and you know, get all your levels coming in at decent range, and all your instruments are in different frequency ranges, and with a little bit of EQ you can actually usually mix with most of your faders pretty close to unity, and actually get a pretty decent mix. You know, so you just have some variance, maybe, you know, the slightly ups and downs, and then your vocal might be just a little bit hotter than everything else, so it sits on top. But you can usually have something, you know, that might look similar to this or whatever, and can actually be a pretty balanced mix. So it's just all in the art of mixing and trying things out, and see what you can do. If you can, you know, practice with the band in rehearsal, so you really know what they sound like, and you know what levels you can get on them, what instruments and where they're tuned out. You can get them all together. So the last section of this mixer is it has the digital control, has your digital effects here, and you have just a little rotary encoder is what it's called, a digital. This is not a pot, it's actually called an encoder because this is a digital version. So you just see the numbers here, and most onboard effects are going to be like this, and you have a little display screen. It'll tell you what's up here and what each one of those numbers are is for your halls and delays and all that. So so it works pretty decently just to get a simple reverb. And then like I said in this video, I'm not going to go into all the auxiliary outboard gear, but of course you can get reverb units and delay units and all that. And basically to send signal to those, you would be using these aux outputs. You'd be sending out of that board into that piece of gear, into that reverb unit, and then coming back into the board with these, see up here, if you can read it, it actually says stereo aux returns. So basically where that aux is sending out to a source, that's coming back from that device into this, and then these will route to your mains. So if you wanted to bus out of your mixer into an outboard effects unit, that's where that would go. But like I said, I'm going to keep this video pretty simple. without using all the outboard gear, because then it can get complicated, and there's literally hundreds of options with that. So just a basic mixer operation, you can just use the little simple onboard reverb units and still create a pretty decent sounding mix for a room. And then one thing you will notice is that this one only has 8 mic ends. And then, like I said before, when I showed, if you saw the first video to this, which I recommend, watch all 3 of them, is these have stereo inputs. So you have left, right, left, right, left, right, and left, right up here. And then these have a button that is either +4 or -10 on that incoming voltage. So if it's not hot enough, you can boost it. If it's too hot, you can bump it out, and then it'll subtract that incoming voltage down. But because it's not a mic preamp, these are line level inputs. And when I talked about the DIs, I talked about you had line level and mic level. These are meant for coming in from something that's outputting line level, like maybe a keyboard, like your laptop playback. So I have plugged in here, I have my coming from my iPad for music coming into it. That's what can plug into these devices up here, into these inputs. So you don't get a preamp gain. So you can't use these for mics because you don't have microphone gain controls on those channels. So they are meant to be a line level stereo input. So read the manual to your board, make sure you know what every output does, you know what every control does, and then you will be a lot better off in operating your board once you understand it. You know, there's always different outputs and returns and tape ins and tape outs and all that. So every board has different functions and features, so just read the manuals on them. You get a piece of equipment, really read about it so you understand what it does and what it's capable of. So that's pretty much the mixer orientation in a nutshell. I hope I didn't lose anyone, and I did a good enough description of what everything does without going too crazy in depth. So a lot of that just comes with practice of tweaking EQs and stuff. I'm not going to go into teaching EQ lessons because that could be a whole nother video. But EQ is one of the things, experiment, you know, take it away, boost it, sweep it out, and see what sounds good and what doesn't, and see what sounds bad, and you learn what to do and what not to do. There's general basic rules to EQing and stuff like that that you can kind of use as a guide point. So watch some other videos on EQ, but I'm not going to go into mixing teaching because that would be a lot longer video. So I'm just trying to show you the basic hardware and components on how to basically operate and work your gear. And so next I'll show you some basic room tuning stuff on how to get the microphone coming into the channel, and then how to address issues like the dreaded feedback that everyone knows what it sounds like, and a lot of people don't know how to fix it other than just grab that fader and turn it down real quick. So I'll show you a quick little tuning method using that RTA application on the iPad or your iPhone, and how you can eliminate feedback before it ever starts. So you can tune that out before you start your show, and you get the range of where your mic can operate, and it shouldn't feedback at all. So that's that, and we'll go into the feedback tuning.